I'm Devorah Wallen, and I'd like to share my Tea for Two, my Torah thought for 2 minutes, more or less. This week's Torah portion, Parshas Va'era, begins with God reminding Moshe that he's the first person in history to whom he has revealed his ineffable name. He reminds Moshe of his promise to his ancestors that the Jewish people would be released from bondage and inherit the land of Israel. Moshe tells us this great news, but we don't listen. Then he is told to go with his brother Aaron to Paro and tell him to send the Israelites out from Egypt. Last year for Parshas Va'era, I discussed the verse that states that the Israelites could not hear the good news Moshe was bringing, as it says, "The Israelites did not listen because their spirits were crushed due to cruel bondage." We mentioned Rashi's fascinatingly 20th century concept of controlled breathing, helping a person hear and understand better. Feel free to go back to that installment. Here, we will discuss another concept that is found in neuroscience and addictionology. In our Parsha, despite the plagues that God afflicts Egypt with, Paro continues to harden his heart. Moshe and Aaron keep demanding our departure, and even after his country is plagued, he refuses. Paro's arrogant and stubborn behavior causes him to get hooked on himself and his own ideas. It's as if Paro is addicted to his ego's self-absorption. He's inflexible to his own detriment. This is just like the addict who, because of his fixation, he may lose friends and closest relationships, his job, money, and more. To wake up and help himself, he may need to destroy his own life. The 12-step or anonymous programs are a supportive system for people with such addictions and compulsions. The 12 basic steps are learned and practiced for recovery. Whittled down to some of the very basic ideas, the participant must have the humility to acknowledge before God and others that he was in error when engaging in the repeated addictive behavior. Additionally, he or she must acknowledge a power greater can help turn him or her around. Without this humility and acknowledgement, it is not possible to heal. Carl Jung, who was approached while AA was in its infancy, explained the principle that addiction is a spiritual void. Quoting Psalm 42, he explained, "My soul thirsts for God, for the living God." Accordingly, his premise, without becoming humble to one's faults and the acknowledgement that healing comes from God, it's impossible to recover. This was Paro's problem. His arrogance and recalcitrance precluded him from letting go and changing his opinion. According to the commentators, Paro's hubris was so great, he convinced his people that he was a deity and that he created the Nile. As Rashi says, as if speaking in Paro's voice, "My river is my own. I do not need heavenly powers, for my river provides all my necessities, and I made it myself. With my might and with my wisdom, I enhanced my greatness and my dominion." His arrogance made him dig his heels deeper into his evil and perverse habits of denial. This is the ultimate plague of darkness, when one cannot see the havoc he wreaks for himself and his loved ones. One would think the first plague of the Nile turning to blood would be sufficient to shake him. Dayenu. No. According to the Midrash, for the first 5 plagues he was unmoved. The Torah explains that after the 5th plague, God hardened his heart, so his ability to choose and change was made almost impossible. Until then, even though he was stubborn, he still had free choice. Here we see the effects of a negative thought pattern or behavior that is practiced over and over. As the familiar concept in neuroplasticity goes, what you practice grows, or where you place your attention grows. Or, as the Talmud in Tractate Yuma says, if a person commits a sin and repeats it, it becomes to him as if it were permissible. There is a point that after a person practices a behavior over and over, he becomes blind to the gravity of its force, and it becomes extremely challenging to undo. Paro's country was destroyed by the plagues. Now all of his workforce has fled. His army, chariots, wealth, and more have sunk into the sea. Only after he lost everything, bottoming out, as addicts call it, with no options or other directions to go, Paro finally humbles himself, acknowledging Hashem's greatness, and finally repents after he's at his lowest possible state. Koheles or Ecclesiastes says, "V'achai yitena libo," and the living will take it to heart. Anyone who is living, who sees tragedy, pain, people dying or getting sick, should take a lesson from what he or she sees. However, ideally we shouldn't wait until any extreme challenge, certainly not for plagues to strike as Paro passively did. Clearly, it is preferable to be proactive, thinking ahead to prevent future difficulties. However, to be more present and to be able to make better choices, we need to shake our inner Paro from its obstinacy. Sometimes We resist self-awareness when we might even know it is preferable, but our insecurity or our ego shtick gets in the way. May we be able to hear our inner Moshe, the voice of reason who says, "Let my people go," freeing our inner captive who is bound and constrained.